Welcome to the channel, Cheating Secrets, Arrogance, Pride, Conceit. Whatever you choose to call it, scammers have it in abundance. I believe it is a side effect of constantly feeling superior to the people closest to them. I suppose it allows them to feel especially clever or like a secret agent from some movie. In any case, they are special, or at least they think they are. Better than you, or me, or any other decent person who wakes up each morning believing they are safe among friends, family, and people who love them. Of course, all of that is complete nonsense. Lying to people who trust you is not all that difficult, at least not until they catch you doing it. "Darling, great news," exclaimed my wife Tracy, placing her keys and handbag on the small table near the front door. I smiled at her, but somewhat weakly. She had not noticed for several weeks. "What exactly, dear?" "We have been invited to a corporate cruise next weekend," she said. It was a lie, and I knew it for several reasons. First, her eyes were twitching, and her smile was a little strained. After 10 years of marriage, I knew when she was being two-faced, and those were her two main signs. Second, I had read every single text message between her and Austin Butcher, the man she had been sleeping with for the past 5 months. "Wow! That is great," I said, with fake sincerity practically oozing from my vocal cords. How could she not realize? "What is the occasion? Where are we going?" Tracy headed toward the kitchen, continuing to talk to me over her shoulder. "Oh, it is just for meeting our annual sales targets, and I think we are going to a private resort for the weekend. It should be a lot of fun. Do not forget to bring your swim trunks." Listening to Tracy fiddle with our coffee machine, I wondered whether there was any truth at all in the last 2 lies she had just told me. You see, I knew exactly that our destination was Butcher's private island, located a few miles off the Keys, and that the real purpose was for him to take my wife right in front of me. The text messages, remember? When Tracy appeared with her usual post-work cappuccino, I once again found myself thinking whether I should just serve this foolish bitch a lesson and disappear into the unknown. That would certainly be the reasonable thing to do, at least far more reasonable than boarding the private yacht of a millionaire who wanted to have sex with you. However, I had a couple of advantages over Butcher and my wife. First, I knew everything about their plans, and perhaps more importantly, they were both dumber than a pair of doorposts. Tracy was looking at me with a sly smirk. That kind of smile made me think her internal monologue probably went something like this: "I cannot wait to destroy this loser and make him eat the leftover pleasures of my lovers, wrapped in those disgusting slices of pastrami I call my special delicacy," of course, paraphrased. I simply returned her smirk, tit for tat, and politely asked what we were having for dinner. I think it unsettled her slightly. Austin Butcher was not anyone special. At least, not exactly. His father had built a fairly large real estate empire back in the 1980s, and then had a stroke in a Piggly Wiggly, an American supermarket chain, leaving everything to his idiot son. The next 10 years, Austin spent destroying it, mostly due to his own incompetence. Nevertheless, he had an enormous pile of money, which ultimately led him to my wife. My wife Tracy worked as a broker at a gallery that dealt in art and antiques. The kind of crap bought by people with too much money, mostly because it was one of the few long-term investments that politely allowed you to show others just how rich you were, ever since lighting cigars with $100 bills went out of style in the 1920s. Butcher had an office that needed decorating, and Tracy had commissions she wanted to earn. The rest, as they say, is history. To be honest, I think it started out fairly innocently. I still remember Tracy walking through the door with a radiant smile, waving a commission check like she had just won the lottery. It had been a hard year for us. The COVID lockdown had wrecked our local economy, so Tracy's sudden stroke of luck was more than welcome. She practically leapt onto my lap and kissed me with a passion I had not felt in what seemed like years. That is how worn down we all were back then. "Oh, darling," she exclaimed. "We have a new wealthy client, and he is spending money like water." If I had been more attentive, I think I would have seen the dollar signs in her eyes, 20/20 vision and all that. In a way, it was kind of sweet. She used to buy me gifts, at least in the beginning. She talked about Austin all the time, that part was less sweet. Eventually, she stopped mentioning him entirely, and I no longer saw her waving commission checks when she walked through the door, but I knew the money was still coming in. Until that happened. I probably would have remained blissfully unaware of my upcoming date with Austin Butcher if my wife had been a bit smarter. And yes, I am almost certain the guy is hunting me. His fetish revolves around husbands, and the wife is just a personification of his repressed homosexuality. I have a whole theory about this, which I will not bore you with, but to sum it up in 2 words, I think Butcher is a latent homosexual with deeply ingrained homophobia, which manifests as a desire to have sex with women in front of their husbands. One of his most common fantasies is to make men swallow his juice. I mean, really, that should say it all. Apologies, I got sidetracked. Tracy is an idiot. She opened a secret bank account and used our home address. I found the statement. There was a lot of money. More than both of us usually earn in a year. I was a bit stunned, so that evening over dinner, I brought it up indirectly. "Hey, baby," I said, pushing some peas around my plate. "What happened to those big commission checks? I noticed you haven't gotten any in a while." To her credit, Tracy only spit a little bit of red wine from the corner of her mouth instead of spraying it out completely. She hesitated for a moment, the little hamster running the wheel in her brain clearly working overtime. I think he moved away. I have to admit, I nearly giggled watching her. She was acting like a teenage girl who just got caught cheating on her boyfriend. "Oh, do not worry about him, he moved. We don't ride the bus together anymore." "You mean that big real estate dealer, right? What was his name again, remind me." I pretended not to know who he was to ease her suspicion that I might be catching on. It was probably a waste of effort, because, as I already mentioned, Tracy is dumber than a bag of hammers. I think something like Austin," she said. Now I recount all of this lightly in retrospect, but back then, Tracy's attempt to brush me off hit me like a punch to the stomach. In that moment, I was certain my marriage was over. And yet, I still had hope. Maybe she was just having sex with him for the money. I know, that sounds pathetic now too, but the brain plays strange tricks when it is trying to rationally explain your entire life and a 10-year marriage going straight down the drain. So go ahead and sue me. It was only later that night, when I woke up and unlocked Tracy's phone, she still had not bothered to change her code. Yeah, she is that stupid, and read through her text messages, that I fully realized just how bad the situation was. I will admit, I did not cry, but it took me about 2 weeks before my stomach stopped twisting at random times throughout the day. Anxiety will do that to you if you do not manage it, and the best way for me to deal with it was to start working on a plan. Knowing where you are going, at least sometimes, is just as good, if not better, than knowing where you have been. Their plan, like them, was very simple. They were going to drug me during dinner, then, with the help of one of the yacht crew members who was actually a bodyguard, carry me into Butcher's room, tie me to a chair, and then wake me up and start their games. They planned to photograph me performing intimate acts on Butcher in order to blackmail me into even more humiliating actions. Remember my theory about internalized homophobia? It does not sound so ridiculous now, does it? I would like to point out that, no matter how good this plan might sound to an idiot, if you do not want to end up in prison for murder, you should not try slipping sleeping pills into someone's drink. I am serious, you can kill someone that way. And you definitely should not discuss such plans over text messages, especially the kind your husband has copied to a cloned phone stored with his lawyer. I mean, if your husband were a little less ethical, he could have decided to flip the Uno reverse card on your dumb, cheating ass, be just a little less careful with how many pills he gave you, and then simply claim that you screwed up your own plan, because of course, you idiots wrote the whole thing down. Now, it is possible that I actually had a vial of extremely potent benzodiazepine-based sedative, which my wife ordered with her own credit card from an online pharmacy. And maybe it was already in my travel bag, but that was just one of many plans I had for the evening. There was a whole buffet of delights. The virtual pharmacy, see what I did there, was just waiting to be put to good use. Everything from liquid magnesium citrate, which will definitely kick in under 30 minutes, to regular pills I bought from my cousin who was in college. The point is, I had a full deck of Uno cards, I just had to figure out how to play them. We were cruising on the yacht, despite everything, the sea spray hitting us from the bow gave me a sense of energy. The crew was exactly what I expected, a captain, a first mate, a cook, and a steward who was clearly a thug. The other guests included just a couple of people from Tracy's office and her boss, Thurgood, along with his wife, Eliza. Eliza, at least, had the decency to pretend she was somewhat uncomfortable with what was about to happen. She clung to Thurgood's arm and occasionally glanced at me with a frown. Butcher, that pompous jackass, shamelessly flirted with my wife. I did not stop them, after all, I truly did not care. Instead, I focused on hitting on one of Tracy's co-workers, a slim red-headed woman named Claire, and I did so right in front of her husband. Before anyone starts judging me for that, let me clarify, her husband was not some clueless idiot, like they tried to make me out to be. He was fully aware of the entire setup, just like Claire was. Just like everyone else on this floating pile of garbage. I complimented Claire on her bikini. I admired her ass. I kept refilling her drink. I asked her what her favorite sexual positions were. I completely ignored Tracy. It was clear to me that no one knew how to interpret my behavior, and no one found it amusing. Tracy was furious, and I could see out of the corner of my eye that Austin was trying to calm her down. All right. That evening, we were all supposed to have dinner on the yacht, and then, after Butcher began to orally assault me, or whatever else he planned to photograph, we were going to lift anchor and dock at his estate by morning. I was sure the weekend would continue, and I would be getting screwed, quite literally. I was trying to decide whose glass to spike that night, Tracy's or Butcher's. Butcher had a certain poetic irony to it, the idiot wife accidentally killing her lover instead of her husband, when I noticed something in the distance. "Hey, is that a whale?" I said, pointing to the port side of the yacht. Everyone came to the edge of the deck. Eliza must have had decent eyesight because she said, "It looks like something is wrong with it." "Hey, Williams, port side." Butcher called out to one of his lackeys. The boat shifted course and moved forward through the waves, and when we got closer, we saw that it was indeed a whale, a very, very dead whale. The women on board displayed the appropriate signs of sorrow, and Butcher ordered us to turn around, but as the vessel turned to leave, I saw something interesting, which I will come back to later. The time for the performance was approaching, so I excused myself and left, claiming I needed to go to the forward compartment. I went to the kitchen and introduced myself to the cook. We had a pleasant chat about both the dinner that would be served that evening and her previous place of work. She was very busy, facing away from me most of the time, so I eventually asked her where the cleaning supplies were, since I had supposedly made a mess and wanted to clean it up. She pointed me toward a small storage closet in the back of the ship, and I thanked her. I smirked to myself. There were 2 large jugs of exactly what I was looking for. I made a few preparations and then returned, not forgetting to give Claire a light slap on the butt and compliment her bikini again. I swear, this time she smiled. Maybe I should have tried that kind of sexual harassment from the start. It seemed to work for idiots like Butcher. We were all sitting at a large table in the lounge when Butcher stood up from his chair. "I would like to propose a toast." His voice trembled, whether from excitement or nervousness, or maybe both. This guy was a predator, and I did not feel like my ass was safe. I obediently raised my glass with everyone else. To good friends and new beginnings. We exchanged glances. They drank. My mother did not raise a fool, so I set my glass back down without taking a sip. A nervous look passed between my unfaithful wife and her thick-bodied playboy. "Sweetheart, you should drink," she whispered to me. "I do not like champagne," I said. Once again, I saw the hamster start turning the wheel. The vacant eyes were a great clue. But, that is rude, she insisted. It does not matter. I have given up alcohol. You know, it is bad for your health. Another glance, this time between the steward and butcher. We will find you something non-alcoholic, sorry, sir. I would prefer a cola. Of course, sir. I nodded graciously, then cut into my steak. It looked decent, well marinated, cooked medium, and the only dish I had not tampered with. The conversation was sparse and banal. My wife was uncharacteristically silent. I wondered if last-minute guilt was gnawing at her. Most likely not. Here you go, sir, said the thug steward, placing what looked like a glass of cola on the table. I smiled and reached for it with a bit more enthusiasm than I intended, and instead of grabbing it, I knocked it over across the table. Oops. Damn it. You cannot do anything right. Tracy exclaimed. Surly, I whined like a bratty teenager and let out a dramatic huff. It is all right. We will just clean that up and get you another, said Butcher. There were a few beads of sweat visible on his pale forehead. Everyone else looked extremely uncomfortable. Soon, they would feel much worse. You see, liquid magnesium citrate is one of the fastest acting and most powerful laxatives you can get. It is an osmotic laxative, which means it works by drawing water into the small intestine. Earlier, when I went to the forward compartment, I made a little detour to the galley and generously doused everything, except the steaks. I like steaks. Poor Claire was the first to succumb. We all heard the characteristic gurgling sound coming from her intestines, and she politely excused herself with a blush on her face. For a moment, I thought to myself how cute redheads are when they blush. After that, everything went smoothly, or rather, like knocking down a row of dominoes. Next was Eliza, then Thurgood, she must have had a weak constitution, and he was a fast eater, then Tracy, Claire's husband, and finally Butcher himself. That idiot had just enough sense to weakly say, "Something is wrong," when he returned to the table. 4 minutes later, he went on another trip. Here, have something to drink, I said, handing out glasses of water that I had poured from the large pitcher on the table. You do not want to get dehydrated, you could die, I added with feigned seriousness. Tracy took the first glass from me, then the others began to drink as well. The steward returned from the kitchen to warn everyone that there seemed to be some kind of food poisoning at dinner tonight, but he was met by the foul stench coming from Thurgood, who had quite literally soiled himself while clutching his stomach. Now, those of you who are clever, or especially cruel, have probably realized that my offering everyone water was not an act of altruism. I mean, of course it was not, right? No, each glass had been generously laced with MDMA. Most of you know it better as ecstasy. So, if you thought that a yacht full of scumbags violently shitting out their intestines was funny, just imagine that, but also add the effects of Molly. I really wanted to stay and enjoy the spectacle, but honestly, within a few minutes, the stench became unbearable. Tracy, sweetheart, are you all right? I asked my wife. She was lying face down, clutching her stomach and sweating like a sinner at confession. I do not know what is wrong with me. I helped her to her feet and guided her out of the cabin, saying that some fresh air might help. Outside, it was cool, colder than you would expect for winter in Florida, even with the ocean breeze at night. Tracy, can I ask you something? She lifted her gaze from the deck and looked at me. For a moment, the moonlight hit her face, and I almost regretted what I was about to do. Why did you do it, Tracy? Was it only for the money? Her face, already pale, seemed to lose all remaining color in an instant. Her mouth opened like a goldfish gasping for air. What? What? She breathed. Austin. Tracy, why did you sleep with Austin? My voice sounded sadder than I actually felt. That was interesting. I never. She began to lie. I cut her off. Tracy, I know. I know everything. I know what you did. I know what you plan to do tonight. I just do not understand, why? Do you really hate me that much? I sighed and leaned back against the railing. Tracy was clearly struggling to hold herself together. I do not hate you. I swear. I do not know. She mumbled. She was losing the battle. You must hate me. I cannot think of any other explanation for why he would try to hurt me like that. Trying to drug me. Tracy, were you really going to let that bastard rape your husband? Now I was starting to get angry. My hands were clenched into fists with rage. What the hell, Tracy? What did I ever do to you to deserve this? Now she was crying openly. Her sobbing grew so intense that she finally lost control of her bowels. The stench was nauseating, just like she was. For me, this was the moment of truth. Would I go through with my improvised plan, or would I simply call the Coast Guard? It was not too late to end this without bloodshed. To end it with a clear conscience. Unfortunately for Tracy, she was a fucking idiot. Just, shut up. Shut up. You did this. You did this, did you not? She screamed at me. It seemed the hamster had finally reached the obvious conclusion. You bastard. Why could you not just be obedient like you were supposed to be? You spent weeks licking the traces of his passion, a real man, out of me like a pathetic, worthless doormat. The moonlight hit Tracy again, and this time, instead of the sweet and beautiful girl I had once married, I finally saw her for what she truly was. A piece of shit, and covered in it. And you know what they do with shit at sea? They throw it overboard. Put me down, she screamed as I picked her up and threw her over the port side of the yacht. It was not a far drop, but she hit the water with an impressive splash. For a moment, there was blessed silence, and then she surfaced, and the shrieking resumed like a feral cat. You bastard. Get me out of here, you fucking cuck, she screamed. I sighed. What a stupid witch. You see, as I briefly mentioned earlier, it was winter in Florida. A lot of people probably do not know this, but I used to be a science teacher, and, as I noted before, when it is winter in Florida, pods of great white sharks sometimes make their way into our waters. The most interesting thing I saw before dinner was the visible dorsal fins circling around the half-eaten whale carcass. That alone might not have meant much, but I am a science teacher, and damn it, I love Shark Week on television. I watch it every time it airs. I knew that sharks love two things even more than blood, sound and urea. Well, Tracy was making plenty of sound, especially while thrashing in the water. The urea came from the 2 large bottles of ammonia I poured out the open window when I returned to slap Claire on her delicious ass. Tracy had just started another rant about how I was some kind of pathetic little submissive who loved cleaning up after real men. Honestly, I should have shared my theory with her about the inherent insecurity of her boyfriends, when she let out an inhuman scream. My leg, she roared. Yeah. Like catnip for sharks. Or maybe sharknip. I did not really think it would work, and honestly, I would have been fine just watching her drown, but the science teacher in me was more than pleased. After all, it is always nice to see an experiment bear fruit. I leaned over the railing and shouted back at her. We are getting a divorce, witch. She had nothing to say to that. I think she was in shock. I did not stick around to see what happened next. I was not that twisted, and besides, I still had a lot to do. When I returned to the lounge, I saw that most of the crew and guests were passed out on the floor. Big Guy Williams looked like he had overdosed. He had drunk the remaining ice water from the pitcher I had left on the table. Butcher seemed to have finally succumbed to the sedative I had slipped into his drink. His fingertips were turning blue, his breathing was shallow. I found his room, dug through his luggage, swapped out a couple of bottles in Tracy's bag, and then, with a theatrical sigh, did the thing I least wanted to do that night. I locked the door to my cabin, downed a heavy dose of laxatives, and took a hit of ecstasy. It was going to be a long night. What happened next went far better than I expected. Thug Williams, as I had expected, died. His bastard boss survived, but that actually helped me a lot when the cops looked through the phone of my missing wife and discovered the plan to drug me that night. The fact that she had several potent sedatives and MDMA in her luggage, as well as plenty more in her car and office, became a real smoking gun. The true criminal, of course, was Butcher. There were messages between him and Williams where they discussed the plan and even purchased MDMA and Rohypnol for their evening fun with me. The case gained widespread attention and became a massive scandal, so massive that not even Butcher's millions could buy him out of it. In the end, he landed in prison on a laundry list of charges: drug use, assault, and conspiracy. I squeezed every bit of crap out of him in civil court, no pun intended. At first, no one could find Tracy. The press speculated that she had fled the country. The police interrogated me. They used intimidation, bluffing, but ultimately had to back off, because they had nothing. I never even filed for divorce. I did not hire a private investigator, I did not need to. Those two idiots handed me all the evidence I needed, and I never told my lawyer why he was holding the cloned phone for me. I am sure he suspected something, but suspicions were not enough to take to the police, especially after I discussed with him my plans to go after the Butcher estate in court. Just like my wife is a cheater, his eyes lit up with dollar signs at the thought of grabbing a piece of those fat bastards' millions. In the end, a week later, a dismembered torso washed up on North Beach. It was clearly the victim of a shark attack. They identified it as Tracy by the serial number on the remaining breast implant. The police visit started up again, but by that time, I think everyone had already forgotten about it. The officers explained that she fell overboard and was eaten by sharks. In the end, that was more or less the truth. 2 years later, while vacationing at an all-inclusive resort in Playa del Carmen, I met my future wife, Rebecca. Like me, she was a teacher, and like me, she had been cheated on by her ex. Like all redheads, she looked absolutely adorable when she blushed. I remember on the second night, she came into my room and gasped at how well it was furnished. "Rick, I thought you were a schoolteacher, how can you afford all this?" she asked me. I checked her eyes for dollar signs and saw none. She took the whiskey I had poured for her and sank into the sofa. I swear, I caught a glimpse of a fiery little patch when she crossed her legs. "Well, my dear," I said with a mischievous grin, "you've seen my lawyer, he is a real shark. Thank you for being with us. And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like, it helps new stories come to light."